Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. I am Melissa Warpesa, and I serve as the Vice Chair of the APRN Committee of the Kansas State Board of Nursing. I ask the members of the APRN Committee to respond to roll call, signifying their presence at the open meeting that is being held via Zoom and YouTube. Patsy Zeller is unable to attend. Jade Ramsdale. Jamie Harrington. Jamie.
Present. Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, sorry. Dawn Gosnell.
Present.
Thank you. Benjamin Cochran.
Present.
Josie Bell.
Present.
Shannon Gray.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. I also ask the following board staff members to signify their attendance. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator.
Here.
Jill Simmons, Executive Assistant.
Sorry, I thought I had that on mute. I'm
That's
here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Public comment allows individuals to address the APRN committee about their concerns, but the Kansas Open Meetings Act, does not require the APRN committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Public comment will not be taken today because there is a possibility that the connection for this remote meeting may be lost over time, and the time for the meeting may not allow everyone who is present to comment. Additionally, we will not know what comments an individual may make, and we would want to provide notice to the public of our intent to discuss a particular matter so that the public may listen and observe our discussion. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely via Zoom and YouTube, I state for the record the following information. On June 13th, 2022, the board sent notice of the meeting for the APR committee to all individuals who have requested notice of the committee meetings. Additionally, the notice and agenda were posted on the board's website, ksbn.kansas.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice and agenda at that website or by sending an email to carolmoreland@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and the board staff will send it to you. 2, the notice contains the internet links to access the meeting by Zoom and YouTube. The notice also contains the Zoom telephone number to attend this meeting by telephone call. Each of these electronic mediums allow the public to attend this meeting free of charge. The notice also advises individuals to contact the board's office at 785-296-2967 if they experience any technical issues during the meeting. 3, the only mediums for interactive communication offered for this meeting are the connections via Zoom and YouTube, as previously stated. 4, each member of the committee, board staff, or presenter shall state the person's name and title each time the person speaks or votes, as the case may be. 5, each participant in this meeting shall ensure microphones, phones, or other electronic devices are on mute when participants are not speaking. 6, each motion will be clearly stated before the committee votes, and the vice chair will announce the result of the final vote. 7, a statement or motion will clearly identify and authorized by delegation each member of the committee or staff who will be permitted to sign any document on behalf of the committee. 8, the committee is being recorded and the recording will be posted on the board's website. 9, the committee has the following items listed on its agenda: call to order, review of on-site packet, additions or revisions to the agenda, announcements, approval of minutes for the meetings held in March 2022, unfinished business, new business, agenda for the committee meeting in September 2022, and then adjournment. Although the agenda does not include an executive session, if the committee elects to exercise the option to go into an executive session, the committee will follow this process. First, the committee will be in an open session before going into an executive session. Then a motion will be made and seconded pursuant to KSA 7-4319B. The motion must contain the statement of justification for closure, the subjects to be discussed, and the time and place that the open meeting will resume. If a motion for executive session passes, public will be excluded from this portion of the meeting, as the executive session will be conducted by electronic means that will not be made available to the public. The committee members will return to the open meeting after the executive session. The open meeting will resume when the committee members return to the Zoom and YouTube meeting after executive session. The complete motion for an executive session will be recorded in the minutes. The meeting is now called to order, and the committee will now consider the next item on its agenda, which is the review of on-site packet.
This is Carol Moreland, and there is an on-site packet that hopefully you all saw. Just kind of the contents of it. There's one document that Courtney provided that has the status of the pending independent practice of midwife regulations that she's going to talk a little bit more about in number 2 under unfinished business. And then what you also have in there are the temporary regs for that we did in response to the APRN bill. Those were approved by the board on June 20th. And I do go before the state rules and reg board Thursday to talk about those. And then you also have the notice of the public hearing for the permanent regs. And I can talk a little bit more about that when I get to number 3 on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me. I wasn't able to print it. Apologies. Okay, so any additions or revisions to the agenda, Carol?
No, there isn't.
No. And then announcements, you've already made your announcements, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't have any more.
Okay, perfect. And then approval of minutes do I have a motion for approval of minutes for March 29th of 2022?
I have a motion that I can read when you're ready for that.
Okay, we're ready.
Is there a committee member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the minutes from the March 29, 2022 APRN committee meeting as written.
This is Ben Cochran. I'll make that motion.
I can second. This is Jamie. I'm sorry.
Okay, all those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, approval minutes have passed. 5, unfinished business. Prescription monitoring program committee report, Shannon Gray.
Yes, so we met on May 6th, the KTRAX committee did, and what we're working with now is there is a legislative update on a bill, Senate Bill number 200, and what they're looking at is some different areas of possibly having pharmacists that can initiate therapy for certain diagnoses like influenza, urinary tract infections. So they're working on some of that. Also in the bill, looking at increasing the list of individuals who can receive the monitoring data, along with hopefully improving the data itself on maybe even looking at providing data on if patients have overdosed, any other information like that. So they're still working on the bill. So that's mainly what we've been talking about. They're also talking about how to improve the utilization of K-Track so we can get more people using it, get it to more user-friendly through some of the computerized charting networks.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Did anybody have any questions for Shannon? Okay, thank you very much for the update.
You're welcome.
Then appreciate that. And moving on to number 2, unfinished business, the CNM regulations. Courtney?
Can I just, this is Carol,
Oh,
can I
sorry.
just say one thing before Courtney starts, and then, no, Courtney can have it by then. I just want you to be aware on page 6 in your packet, Courtney and I were over in front of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regs, April 26th of 2022, and there was some rather strong feedback given to both boards about the frustration with how this process has went, how slow it's went, I guess would be the way to put it. And I put this in there because they wanted the feedback to go back to the board. So it's going to the APRN committee and the board. And with that, I will turn it over to Courtney, who's general counsel with the Board of Healing Arts.
Hello, yeah. I do I have the ability to share my screen? I'm not seeing it at the bottom.
We'll see if Colton can do that.
Okay.
I can give you that. Give me just a second.
Okay, there it is. Perfect. Well, it says host disabled participant screen
Yes,
share.
I have to allow it. 1 second. You just have to find the right checkbox.
And Carol, I just sent you a revised version of these slides just a couple minutes ago, so you guys have them for your records.
Go ahead and try it now.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
It is starting up. There you go.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys, and thank you, Carol, for letting me be here today. So just a little bit about myself before we kind of jump in. My name is Courtney Sisman. I'm general counsel of the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. Prior to becoming a lawyer, I was actually a social worker for several years. I worked at the Douglas County AIDS Project, connecting patients living with HIV and AIDS to the Ryan White Care Program. And then I worked at DCF as an investigator for child abuse and neglect. And that's kind of where I got the idea to go to law school. I've been with the board since October of 2017. I first started out as a law clerk and then was one of the litigation attorneys here. And what that means for us is the attorneys who prosecute before the Board of Healing Arts any cases. And then I jumped over to the general counsel department and became general counsel. I was assistant general counsel, deputy general counsel, and then became general counsel in December of 2020. So I've kind of held a lot of roles here at the Board of Healing Arts. So yeah, Carol brought up our Joint Committee on Rules and Regulations hearing. She was very kind to appear with me there. And the legislator, the committee did make it clear that they would like to see the rest of these regulations be wrapped up and implemented as soon as possible. And what we're here for today for you guys is review of requested Attorney General edits. And my understanding is that several of you were not on the APRN committee back when all of this originally started. And so I'm going to spend a few moments going through the overview of the history. I am also coming in these regulations towards the end of the implementation of them as well. So bear with me, and Carol definitely has some historical knowledge. Okay, so in 2015, 2016, the Kansas legislature enacted the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act. And I made this key for our council, which we'll talk about in a second. And I think they found it very helpful determining and distinguishing what is a statute and what is a regulation. And I apologize if you guys already know this or some of you know it, but it's always a good reminder. So anything we're talking about that has a KSA in front of it, that is a statute, and it is created by the Kansas legislature. And any change that needs to be implemented via that way is done over at the Capitol. KARs are regulations, and they are the ones that are written by the agency and for us have advisory council input. They are subject to somewhat of a bureaucratic process where you have initial board approval. Now you need Department of Administration stamp, an Attorney General stamp. You used to need Department of Budget stamp, but now that's only in certain circumstances. And then you have to go to the Joint Committees on Rules and Regulations and have a public hearing, and then final board adoption. So any change that you want in regulation, this is the process that occurs. And at any point in the Department of Administration or Attorney General regulations, if they want edits, got to start that process over again and go back to Department of Administration and go forward. So it's not as quick moving as you would like. There's a lot of different levels of agency review here. Okay, so in the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act, there is a council that has been established, and this is all set out by statute. 2 of the members are MDs that the Board of Healing Arts appoints, whose specialty is in customary practice and obstetrics. 4 are Board of Nursing appointees who are licensed certified nurse midwives. And then we have either the Board of Healing Arts president or the president's designee. They are the ones that help advise the Board of Healing Arts in carrying out the provisions of this Practice Act. And really what that means for this group and where we're at now is they've been instrumental in developing the proposed regulations. They are the ones that really got in the meat of it to develop the comment or the content, come to that compromise that is before you. So I have listed up here who currently serves on the council, and Jamie Harrington, who I saw here today, is on the council. Okay, and so part of the Practice Act that is a really, quite frankly, unique is that there is a provision that does require both the Board of Healing Arts and the Board of Nursing to come to a concurrence on certain regulations for this license type. And that is when they're governing the order of tests, diagnostic services, prescribing of drugs, and referral or transfer to physicians in the event of a complication or emergency. And those are the regulations that are before you today. There is also a provision that any administrative type regulations can be solely adopted by the Board of Healing Arts. So like your fee regulation, but I will note that all of the regulations that we've done for this license type, we have sent them all to the Board of Nursing. Okay, so this is a roadmap of the regulation promulgation process, but I've kind of intertwined it with what's before you today. So you have a concept of what this actually looks like in an outlined version, but also where we're at in the process. So the development of the proposed regulations, these were developed, the council meeting started back in 2016, and I believe they held 9 within a year or so to develop the content of the proposed regulations. To date, we've had 16 meetings, and now I want to say maybe since October of last year, we started holding these meetings quarterly. And we intend to continue holding them at least quarterly. Right after Joint Committee on Rules and Regulations in April, I scheduled one really quick to make sure we could try to get these in place as soon as possible. Okay, so that's your first step especially when you're implementing a new license type, you have to develop the regulations. The first step then is you have to get initial board approval. So the Board of Healing Arts, the Board of Nursing have provided initial approval for the regulations that are before you today. But remember, the ones that are before you today need to have concurrence on all the content. And since the Attorney General's office is requesting revisions, that is why I brought them back before you today and hopefully the Board of Nursing tomorrow. So initial board approval has happened. And then we went to Department of Administration. We got the Department of Administration stamp. And then it went to the Attorney General's office. And that is where we're at. So we're right here on these regulations. Now, if these do receive approval, the final steps to these regulations and really any permanent regulation is for these ones, we'll have to resend them to the Department of Administration and Attorney General's office, get those stamps. And then we will have to do two things somewhat simultaneously in a 60-day window period. We will have to appear before the Joint Committees on Rules and Regulations again, and we'll also hold a public hearing. Then after that happens, it'll go to the board for final adoption. And then after that, we publish it in the register and it becomes effective, I believe 15 days thereafter. So that is the long process of regulations, and hopefully this provides a good visual as to where we're at. So we're really coming in towards the end for the regulations that are here before you today. Okay, so for the first proposed regulation before you today, this is 128B8. And I've tried to make this as simple as possible, highlighting the Attorney General's edits. And they have requested that subsection B and subsection C be eliminated in this proposed regulation, as there's authority for any unlawful practice of any profession that the board licenses and regulates in the Healing Arts Act. And then they have also requested this highlighted portion here be moved to the next regulation that we are talking about. So I took these proposed edits before the Independent Certified Nurse Midwife Council and reviewed them with them at the March 31st, 2022 meeting. And I am in agreement with these proposed regulation changes from the Attorney General's office, and the council also agreed. And I think I'm gonna, Carol, unless you have a different process you'd like to follow, I think I'd like to go through all of them and then open it up for questions. Does that work?
Yeah, I think that's fine, Courtney.
Okay, so the next one is really simple based on the last one. This is for the scope of practice. This is just adding in the portion that they would want to remove from the previous one into this one. And again, the Independent Nurse Midwife Council agreed to these on March 31st. And then for this one, this is also, in my opinion, quite a simple fix, but they wanted the failure to meet the requirements of this regulation to constitute unprofessional conduct under the unprofessional conduct regulation, which I believe makes sense. And the Independent Nurse Midwife Council agreed to this edit on March 31st, 2022. And then the unprofessional conduct one. This regulation is actually longer than what I could fit on one slide. I believe it is in your APRN book in its entirety, 15 through 9, pages 15 through 19. And there's several edits here. I don't believe any of them really necessarily alter the substance of the regulation. They did have us remove provisions that are already considered unprofessional conduct in statute. So in essence, they're saying, well, this is duplicative. You already have authority for this being unprofessional conduct in statute, which I agree. And then they wanted the addition of failing to meet the requirements of 11, which we discussed a few slides ago, be added into here. And then they had some simple clarification on wording. So in what is now, I believe it's A24, they added in being found to have practiced ... And then in 28, engage in a practice, behavior, or conduct that violates, I believe it's, let me pull it up. That violates a federal law or regulation relating to controlled substances. And then in 31, 32, and 33, they just had us add in at the end under the Independent Practice of Nurse Midwifery Act. This one I took before the Independent Nurse Midwife Council on June 2nd, and they are in agreement with all of the changes. So I heard you guys had a copy of something similar to this in your on-site packet. I went ahead and updated this yesterday because there has been some movement since I sent Carol that last chart. But these are the remaining proposed regulations and where they're at in terms of status, because Carol's been great to work with to really try to move these forward and get these implemented. So there are 4 of them that Carol and I were at the Joint Committee on Rules and Regulations. It's 3, 6, 14, and 20 that we then had a public hearing on, and the board provided final adoption at our June 10th meeting, and they have since been published in the registrar. And so those 4 are going to become effective on July 8th. So those are pretty much almost complete. We're just waiting for the date to pass. There are 3 currently at the Attorney General's office. That is 2, 4, and 7. And then the ones before you today are noted here. And this one, the Attorney General's is ready to give the stamp on that one, but they're waiting to see if we get this batch, if there is approval for this batch, to go ahead and do them all at one time. And then just some quick information as to where we're at in terms of independent certified nurse midwives in Kansas. As of June 15th, we now have 15 licensed independent certified nurse midwives. We have the practice handbook on our website, and this is hyperlinked in my slides. And it will be updated as these regulations become effective. It will be reflected in there. The initial application is also on our website, and I went ahead and put our board policies link on here too. We do have policies that may be applicable to independent certified nurse midwives, not necessarily all of them, but we do have a telemedicine one that is pretty good in terms of general guidance and things like that. So that is my contact information, and I am happy to answer any questions, or Carol, however you want to proceed forward with this, I am fine.
Madam Vice Chair, perhaps if anybody has questions, just to kind of explain the process coming out of the APRN committee. If the APRN committee is in consensus that these should go to the board tomorrow, because the board's the one who has to approve them from the Board of Nursing, it has to be the board members. And so if the APRN committee is in consensus to take these forward to the board tomorrow, then there would be a roll call vote for each one of these done at the board meeting tomorrow. I also thought it would be very helpful, you can see what you think, about Courtney doing this same presentation at the board tomorrow, because there's probably only 3 board members that have much history with this at all. And so I think Courtney did a great job of doing an overview of the process and everything. So depending on how you feel about that, perhaps she could do this presentation at the board meeting tomorrow. Other than that, I think if you all have questions, or if Jamie has any comments since she's on the council.
Thank you, Courtney. I think I really appreciate her tenacity since she's been on and trying to get these regulations pushed through, because as you guys know, there's been a long history of, just waiting on these and disagreements and stuff. So Courtney's done a really good job with that. I do have a couple concerns. I think it's important just for this board to understand the history of, in statute, the Midwifery Council is just an advisory committee. And so what that means is that some of these regulations we have had disagreements on, and they have moved forward. And one of those is in the 128B8, which is the use of the term CNMI to identify licensees. And part of our concern, I think the Board of Nursing had concerns with this as well, is that it's not nationally recognized. As nurse midwives, we already have a lot of consumer confusion about who we are. And so we were concerned that this would create more consumer confusion. And it's not recognized by insurance companies as far as billing and credentialing or EHR. So I did go back and look because I also haven't been on the Board of Healing Arts Midwifery Council for the entire history. And so in 2018, the Board of Nursing did respond to Regulation 100, 28B9 and 28B8 with similar concerns. And I'm not sure that those have been addressed. And I did send that to you, Carol and Jill, but it was last minute because I kind of found it at the last minute. So I do still have some concerns just with that language. And I think it's important to know that even though, as Courtney said, as a midwifery council, we did vote to approve the AG revisions, we didn't approve, or there wasn't agreement on the use of CNMI. And that was reflected in the minutes in the very beginning. So I have concerns about that, and I have concerns about 128B9, which severely limits the scope of practice for nurse midwives. And with the new passage of the APRN bill, I'm not sure how that's going to look on both sides. So I think that's something, especially with 28B9, that we might need to take into consideration before approving that here.
Carol, this is Melissa. Do we have any information on Jamie's concerns with the new House Bill 2279?
Well, it talks about in there, just a minute, let me pull
Carol,
it up.
I can jump in on that one too.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
'cause it does address this.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So in House Bill 2279, there is an explicit provision that says an advanced practice registered nurse certified in the role of certified nurse midwife and engaging in the independent practice of midwifery under the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act with respect to prescribing drugs shall be subject to the provisions of the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act and shall not be subject to the provisions of this section. I will also note there's something very similar in the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act. So that this bill does not impact the Independent Nurse Midwifery Act in that way. Carol, do you agree?
I do agree. Yeah, I knew that there was that language in there. Yes.
So I think the concern would be that seeking a CNMI license would severely restrict our practice, and there would be no reason that a nurse midwife would choose that path now that this is passed.
So in KSA 6528B07, subsection B, it says a certified nurse midwife engaging in the independent practice of midwifery shall be subject to the provisions of the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act with respect to ordering of tests, diagnostic services, and prescribing of drugs, and shall not be subject to the provisions of KSA 651130. So in my opinion, you would still need this to be able to independently practice midwifery, and we plan on continuing to make this license type available.
And so at that, I would strongly encourage the board to reject those two regulations because they are not consistent with ACNM nurse midwife scope of practice. And again, it severely limits our practice in Kansas.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? I know Jamie is our expert here.
This is Carol Moreland. I just have a question for Jamie. Did the council have any suggestions for the CNMI? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion about that.
So my understanding is that all midwives were against the CNMI, and it, again, as an advisory council, they voted against that, but it was still taken on to the executive board and moved forward with.
Okay, and I want to make sure I have these written down. Will it's 100-28 be 9?
Yes.
Okay,
And
The CNMI one,
8.
8 is the CNMI designation.
9 is the scope of practice.
9 is scope of practice. Okay.
And this is Josie Bell. Can you review again for me? I'm sorry, the restrictions to your practice, because I know I'm unclear on what this language does to your profession.
So restrictions in statute are severely limited, but since we're talking specifically about regulation, if you're talking about statute, it limits the ability to care for any primary care patient or GYN. It limits it only to pregnancy, labor, delivery, and family planning. And then the Board of Healing Arts has further put restrictions in. Let me pull them up real quick here. Which include you cannot provide any clinical services to a patient that has a multiple gestation pregnancy, non-cephalic presentation of the fetus at the onset of labor or rupture of membranes, or any interpartum care to a patient with a prior C-section and delivery. And there's no avenue in here for collaboration with those conditions. It just says that you cannot do that. And I know in my practice, we frequently take care of twins, especially just during pregnancy. We also collaborate with our physicians and work with them during delivery. Same thing with patients undergoing VBAC in the hospital.
Then I concur, that does seem to restrict your practice.
And it also goes in here and defines scope of practice exactly. It says that you can do, a licensee may provide clinical services within the scope of practice by KSA 65-28B02 and including the following, and then it actually lists out specific things that you can do, which again is concerning when you're listing specific scope of practice one by one. It just sets you up for liability and litigation.
Do we know what the 65 one says you can do?
65. Which one? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
You start out by saying it, you can do everything in K something 65.
02. So if I'm following, you're asking what an independent practice of midwifery can do within, as outlined in statute.
Yes.
Okay, so in KSA 6528B02 subsection C, the independent practice of midwifery means the provision of clinical services by a certified nurse midwife without the requirement of a collaborative practice agreement with a person licensed to practice medicine and surgery, when such clinical services are limited to those associated with a normal, uncomplicated pregnancy and delivery, including the prescription of drugs and diagnostic tests, the performance of episiotomy or repair of a minor vaginal laceration, the initial care of a normal newborn, and family planning services, including treatment or referral of male partners for sexually transmitted diseases.
Thank you.
I would just ask that after looking at the KSBN response to some of the regulations from 2018, I don't know that all those have been addressed. That was their concerns at that time. And so I would ask that we table this discussion and discuss more at the next meeting.
So I don't know if this would be appropriate, and Carol, maybe you can jump in too, but if there are certain ones that the APRN does have committee does have a consensus on, if we could move ahead with those and then revisit the ones that we need to with the council, just so we continue moving forward, I would appreciate that.
Jamie, are there any that you feel are appropriate for the midwifery practice?
Those were really the only two that I had concerns with. The ones that have been triple stamped already, the 128B-3 is approved course of study in nurse midwifery. We could move forward with that. Courtney's got one.
So sorry, those ones have moved forward. The triple stamps have already been through the process. The 4 that are before you today, what I'm hearing is not necessarily any objection to 11 or 19, which is the unprofessional conduct and licensees who direct and supervise. And those are, I would say those 2 are connected to each other, the 11 and 19, and then the 8 and 9. We can go back to the council.
I'm just reading through the comment that KSBN had before on 11. The comment was KSBN did not see the designation of CNMI in the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act. It also appears this designation is related to a person simultaneously practice as an independent CNM practicing under the Independent Practice of Midwifery Act and as an APRN with a collaborative practice agreement under the Kansas Nurse Practice Act. If so, KSBN raises the same concern addressed under KAR 28B9, basically.
So I don't see anywhere in 11 where it talks about the CNMI designation.
Yeah, that was just their response to that regulation in 2018. So we may have removed that.
Yeah, and I have found some stuff in the file that indicates there's been some correspondence between the former version of me and the Board of Nursing, trying to just clarify some technical legal issues. So it's possible it was cleaned up then too.
I don't have any concerns specifically with this one.
Or the KAR 100-28B-19 unprofessional conduct wording? Any concerns with that one?
I do not have any concerns with that one.
And you'd feel okay taking a vote on 19 and 11
Yes.
and tabling 9 and 8 and having those discussions.
Yes, I feel good about moving forward if the board does.
Okay, so Carol, as a new leader, we can call for do we have to vote down 8 and 9 before we can go on with 11 and 19?
My suggestion of how you do this is it's the consensus of the APRN committee after reviewing these 4 that 8 and 9 be referred back to the council to work with Board of Healing Arts or whatever on those, but that it's the consensus that the Board of Nursing approve, I'm not sure exactly what the word is here, 11 and 19. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, right?
That's what I understood, Jamie. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you're our expert.
I will just say, I think it is important. I agree with Courtney that we move as much ahead as we can. You know, but I think there are some obvious concerns about the other two. So if those could, you know, we'll see what the board says, but if those could go back to the council for a little bit more work, maybe discussion or something.
Yeah,
But I don't think you need a vote coming out of here. I think when you
Okay.
report back tomorrow, Melissa, when
Okay.
you do the APRN committee, you can kind of talk to this. And it would be my suggestion at that time, again, that Courtney be brought in to do her presentation, because I think it would be a really good review for the board members, because again, we've got a lot of new board members since we were doing this a few years ago. And I think they need to understand what this is all about, if that's okay with Courtney.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I think that'd be best. So everybody's on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you said we don't need a vote out of this out of here, so we
No.
will no vote for anything at this point, but to send back 8 and 9 for further discussion, and 11 and 19 will be presented at the board meeting for approval. Is that correct?
That's what I heard.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other concerns? Not what you heard? Okay. All right. Let's move forward then.
And then, sorry, just real quick. Hey, Carol,
Go ahead.
Carol or Jill, I have not gotten a link for the board meeting tomorrow. So if I could do that, and I'll just slightly tweak my presentation to update it with the 2 regs. So thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay. Number 3, and Jamie, thank you as well. Implementation of House Bill 2279.
Okay, this is Carol Moreland, and I just wanted to update the committee on where we're at with all of this, because you remember the bill has 2 implementation dates, with the first one being Friday. And so we had to revise the regulations, and we had to go with temp regulations, because when you do permanent regulations, you have to have at least a 60-day comment period. We didn't have 60 days to not have these in place. So for that reason, what you see in the on-site, starting on page 3, is the temporary regs that were approved by the board: 60-11-101, 60-11-103, 60- I should know this by heart now. 60-11-104, 60-11-104A, 60-11-105, 60-11-107, and 60-11-113. These are temporary regs that I have to make the last testimony on Thursday morning. And hopefully that rules and reg board, it's not the same thing as the joint committee. It's kind of a different one. But anyway, they look at the temporary ones. So hopefully they're not going to have any issues with them. And they will be effective then on July 1st. So we will have made that. And what you have on those pages that I told you, that is the clean copy, which means all the strike through, all the underlining and all of that has been taken out because they've been adopted by our board. So that's what will be going forward. And the temporary regs are good for 120 days. So meanwhile, we took the permanent regs through the first part of the process, the approval process, and they made it through Department of Administration, the Attorney General, a couple of times back and forth because they wanted some changes and stuff like that. And so the the notice for the public hearing on page 19 in your on-site packet, plus the permanent regs will be published in the Kansas Register Thursday. And then they will be available on our website so that everyone knows about the public hearing. Everybody knows about the proposed ones that we're talking about, and they can make comments. They can either come to the public hearing and make comments, call into the public hearing and make comments, or they can submit any written comments to me anytime during that 60 days. And then what will happen is all of those comments after the public hearing on September 6th will be put in the board packet for the board to review in September. And then hopefully everything will be ready to adopt them at that point. So that's the plan right now with all of that. What you will see, the changes that were made in the regulations are truly right out of the bill. There's nothing else put in there that was not in that bill. We stuck very close to that bill, hoping that would help it get through. And there were a few changes that the Attorney General's office requested and stuff, not huge big ones, but enough to make the changes and send it back through again. Other than that, the changes that the malpractice requirement goes into effect July 1st. There's been a huge amount of confusion. I'm not sure where all this misinformation is coming from, but there was some belief that everyone had to send their malpractice insurance to us on July 1st. That is not what the bill says. The bill says that an APRN as of July 1st of 2022 is required to have malpractice insurance and provide proof at the time of licensure renewal. Okay, that's the key right there. So what we have done to the renewal application is we have changed it. You won't see it yet. It's going to go out there on July 1st. But anyway, we have changed it to where the APRN will have to provide the name of the insurance company and the policy number. We are not going to go out and check all of these. What will happen is if for some reason there's a complaint or something against that APRN, that will be part of the investigation. Is the APRN will have to submit proof of that at that point. We do not have the ability right now to have documents uploaded, you know, with our online applications and stuff like that. And truly this had to be put into place so fast that that's what we came up with. There has just been a lot of, like I said, miscommunication, misunderstanding about a lot of things in the bill. You know, we've put information on our website. There's a link to the bill on our website, but I still get phone call after phone call after phone call telling me something that's not true. And there's no way they could have reviewed the information on the website and still believe that. So, I mean, it's to the point that we have gotten calls about, is what's on your website really accurate? It's like, yeah. So we did put out a special edition of the newsletter yesterday that is devoted only to the APRN changes. And that should have gotten pushed out to anybody who subscribed to our newsletter. So I would encourage you when you're talking to others to refer them to that. We will have information on our website by July 1st that may talk about these actual little bitty process changes, procedure changes and stuff like that, because that doesn't go into a regulation. You know, a good example of that is they will no longer have to do the controlled substance verification form because they won't have a responsible physician. And the bill makes it very clear they're responsible for registering with the DEA. We're not this middle person anymore. So that is a process that has changed. Just a few little things like that will have changed. And then we, of course, on the initial application, we have picked up the malpractice requirement, and they again will have to put the name of the insurance company, the policy. We've changed the attestation at the end of the applications so that they are attesting that they know what the APRN practice is in the state of Kansas. They realize that they have to have malpractice insurance. So when they either submit it or they sign the application, if it's a paper application, they are verifying that. So that kind of falls back on them. We don't really have anything about the certification yet because that actually goes into effect July 1st of 2023, which brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you all about is the bill says that the board has to approve the national certification organizations that the board will accept. Okay, well, we have never done this, okay? So what you're gonna have to do is figure out what are the requirements for someone to be approved by our board. I brought this to you all because you are the APRNs, you are all certified. So you have better knowledge of this because KSBN has not been involved with this other than with the CRNAs. It was required for them, but not for anybody else. So in your packet on page 38, and this is just a starting point because I wasn't really sure where to even start. I pulled some stuff off from National Council, you know, their campaign for the APRN consensus, the requirements, and then the criteria for evaluating them starts on page 40. I didn't know if any of this would be helpful. We really need the help of the APRN committee on this to help determine what the criteria should be. And then perhaps some of the APRN committee members can help do some of this by going through the certifying organizations to see if they meet the criteria. So that then, because this all, again, has to be in place. The last you'll be able to discuss this will be a year from now at the June 2023. It's got to be in place by July 1st of 2023. So that's a part yet that we haven't even been down, but we're going to have discussion. So I don't know if any of you have feedback on that, how that could take place.
And Carol, that's just looking at the board certification body, not the actual programs, right?
Right, that is actually the certifying organizations, but it does say in the bill, it says, as meeting the qualifications or the requirements of the board. I can't remember, but something very similar to that. I'm sorry, I should have had it. But so that means that you're going to have, you know, some criteria to say, yes, this is what they have in place. So further, because of that, we're going to put them on our list of approved, because what can happen then is APRNs that are coming in for initial licensure can ask us for that list to make sure that whatever certifying agency that they're certified through is on our list, because otherwise they're not going to be able to get licensed, get an initial license if they're not certified by one of those organizations on our list starting July 1st of 2023.
Right.
The way the bill's written.
That makes sense. I wonder
Yeah.
if we could look at other states and see how they're doing it. Because I'm guessing it's similar to how we approve our programs. We just have to have that criteria like you mentioned.
That's a wonderful idea, Jamie. I'm sure we could learn something from the other states that have gone full practice authority. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And the only ones that I really see a problem with would be some of the weirder certifications maybe, but most of them are pretty standard AANP, AAN, so.
Jamie, this is Josie. Do you guys have multiple accrediting bodies or do you have one national?
For midwives or?
Yes.
Ours is just AMCB, and American Midwifery Certification Board.
Okay. I'm ignorant. I'm sorry. It doesn't, it doesn't tell me much, but thank you.
Well, and that's a good point because I know we require a master's degree for the board, but there's also, you know, like professional midwives that take a different board certification. So it would be important that obviously they're not going to be licensed as APRNs in Kansas. So
I see. So it's more than just figuring out, well, we already have a national body and it says this, so we'll just use that, that body. There will be multiple levels also to get listed.
Well, I don't think so because they're not APRNs, but it would be
Okay.
important in our regulations that we have.
Okay,
that
thank
in
you.
place.
And I just, this Carol, and I just noticed the time. It's 3:05 and practice committee has to start and we can only do one Zoom at a time. Right, Colton? So we got to kind of be winding it down. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that was gonna be my next question, Carol. Do we push this, the remaining agenda to September?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, the remaining agenda to September.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I have one more question. Is this always on the last Tuesday of the month or does it vary?
Normally it's not the last Tuesday. Normally this would have been 2 weeks ago. The only time it's the last week is in March. Other than that, December, June, and September, it's usually like the second week, but we have all of those dates on our website, like 4 years out or something along that line. But this particular one got changed and there's been a lot of confusion because of that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess if there's no further comments, Carol, do I adjourn the meeting? Do I have to take a vote or is it okay just to push the rest of the agenda items off until September as long as everybody's in agreement? There's no further questions. So we can get on to the next meeting.
Yep.
All right.
That's
I'll
fine.
see everybody in September. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.